When you use SQL in your applications, you're essentially just generating lots of SQL statements as strings in your code. And when you do that, you're often referencing table names and column names in your projections and your selections and your sorts. And I want to introduce you to something that I do to cut down on the possibility of creating errors by misspelling or creating typos. Now this is basically common sense, and I'm sure many of you already do this, but this is how I perform this. Let's take a look at the Champion Collection View Controller, where I use a query task to build a projection to query the champion table. And I also specify a sort. You may have noticed this in other videos. Instead of a string here, which references the column name, or in the projection here, where I want the name column, the image column, the ID column, and the title, instead of just hard-coding strings in here, I reference these APIs that I create, which I'll call the SQL DatabaseContract. And everywhere throughout the application where I reference column names or table names, I use this structure. Let's have a look at this contract where I specify all these strings. Instead of clicking here, I'm just going to navigate to the DataDragon module, and there's a class here called DataDragonContract. This is the magic class where I define, this is the header file, this is a file that contains all the information, all the strings about my database. And for each database in your application, I would encourage you to do this. So let's skip this for now. But I have basically a bunch of declarations here for each database table. So here's the champion table. Here's the columns for the champion table. Here's the champion skin table. Here's the champion skin columns, etc. So I just repeat this for each table and the columns in each table. And if we look at the implementation, it's just a bunch of static methods. For example, here's the champion, and I just return strings. For the URI, well, we're going to skip the URI for now, but for the columns, blurb, champion ID, image URL, key, name. So this allows me to avoid typing these strings everywhere in my code and instead referencing them through an API. So if I inadvertently had a typo, I could fix it here and it would be fixed everywhere. So again, this is just common sense, but this is the technique that I use. I have one file where all of my table names and all of my column names are defined and they're hidden from the rest of the application, and I just reference them through this API.